Chris Lemons from Cambridge realized his dream of becoming a qualified saturation diver. By using a combination of helium and oxygen, this type of diving reduces the risk of decompression sickness. They also avoid the need for daily decompression by spending nearly a month inside a saturation chamber. It is contained within a ship and compressed to the working pressure of the seafloor, which is 9 times that of the surface. In September 2012, his company was awarded a contract to replace oil pipelines on the seabed at the Huntington oil field, approximately 160 kilometers east of Peterhead, Aberdeenshire. The fact that he would be working on this task with Duncan Alcock, who had been diving in the North Sea for 17 years, encouraged him. He was Lemon's mentor, and he could always rely on him for advice. Chris also learned about the team's third member, Dave Uwasa, and he only heard good things about him. A team of 3 divers lives in one of these 2-meter by 2-meter tin cans for 28 days. Every day, the 3 men climb into a diving bell and are lowered to the seafloor to work on the rigs that pump thousands of barrels of oil every day. They would work 6 hours a day without a break, but the most difficult part would be living in such close quarters with 2 other people for a month. On September 18th, as the diving bell was lowered with Lemons and colleagues over the edge of the deck of the ship Topaz at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, a storm raged above with 60-kilometer-per-hour winds. As the bell sank to a depth of about 100 meters below the ship, the cable slowly unwound. Umbilical cables connected to the divers carried everything they needed to stay alive. Warm fluid was pumped around their suits to keep them warm in the water. A tube delivered oxygen and helium to their masks, as well as power to their lights and cameras. Alcock's job was to make sure the umbilical cables didn't get tangled and to keep an eye on all diving indicators. On the surface, the weather was getting worse, but it wasn't anything Topaz couldn't handle. The ship lacked fixed propellers and instead used a modern system that allowed it to float without an anchor. At the bell, Alcock double-checked Lemons and Uwasa's diving helmets one last time. He assured them that everything would be fine as long as they did not rush. Lemons has always found the moment when he emerges from the meter-wide opening in the bell and finds himself surrounded by dark water to be magical. Leaving the bell made him feel disembodied, as if he were floating in an underwater world illuminated by his helmet's lamp. Uwasa and he swam quickly to the oil rig platform. It took them some time to locate the damaged pipe in the maze of piping and valves. Craig Frederick, the supervisor of divers, sat in the control room on the Topaz. He issued orders based on the footage from the diving helmet cameras. Everything appeared to be fine to him. Routine, everyday work. Alcock kept an eye on air indicators for divers in the bell. Lemons had been at work for about an hour when the alarm went off. It was coming from a ship-connected communication device. The positioning systems on the Topaz suddenly shut down. The ship was carried by the current, dragging the diving bell and divers with it. If something is not resolved, it will take the divers with it. Alcock shouted into the microphone. "Drop everything, drop your tools and get back." Lemons and Uwasa could only obey. They grabbed the cables and made their way to the bell. They moved faster by using parts of the platform. Lemons peered into the darkness. He was expecting to see the light of the diving bell, but there was none. Nothing but darkness, slashed by the light beams of his lamp. However, as he climbed, his umbilical cord became entangled in the structure. The line tightened in seconds as the ship above drifted away. As the umbilical cord tightened, he was sucked into the structure. He was well aware that he was in big trouble. When you're fighting a ship weighing 8,000 tons, there can only be one winner. At the bell, Alcock noticed Lemons' cord was much tighter than usual. Something was going on out there. Not only was it too tight, but the cord was pulling its anchor off the wall, bending steel struts and groaning bolts. It was unthinkable. If the cord snapped, Lemons would be adrift and without oxygen. Alcock also knew that if it came loose in this small space, It would knock him through the bottom of the bell and into the water. He climbed onto his seat quickly to get out of the way. But he couldn't do anything for Lemons. Yuasa rushed to assist Lemons as he struggled to free himself, but the ship dragged him away. Their hands were only 20 centimeters apart. Lemons could almost see Yuasa's sad expression as he vanished into the darkness. Lemons used every ounce of his strength to untangle the hose. He then heard something break. The umbilical cord stretched, creaked, and snapped in seconds. Before he could do anything else, the cable snapped, sending him tumbling back to the seabed. Chris lost air, warmth, and light, leaving him completely helpless on the sea floor, 100 meters below the surface. He turned on the emergency oxygen tank that divers carry on their backs. He knew he was on the clock as soon as he turned on the emergency tank. If he does not return to the bell within 5 or 6 minutes, he is done. Lemons managed to pull himself upright and feel his way back to the well structure, climbing it again to the top in the hope of seeing the bell and returning to safety. However, when he reached the top, he couldn't see the diving bell's lights. He huddled on the platform, his fingers gripping the metal grate, afraid that the current would drag him away. There are about a few minutes of oxygen left. Alcock frantically pulled up the slack umbilical in the bell, hoping Lemons would be at the end of it. As the broken hot water hose emerged, his heart sank. Then there was the hissing air line. He could only manage to say, "We lost a diver." The situation worsened above on the surface. The crew struggled to keep the ship under control as it drifted about 300 meters. Lemon's fears gradually turned to terror as the minutes passed. He knew where he was headed. His lungs contracted as his oxygen levels dropped. He hoped death wouldn't be too painful. He was slowly sinking to the other side. Frederick ordered the remotely controlled submarine to be lowered. It sent pictures of Lemons. He was lying down and holding on to the bars. He was barely alive, twitching and gasping for air. And then he just stopped moving. It's been 16 minutes since the cable broke. Yuasa returned to the bell, but was now mustering the strength to go out again and look for his colleague. Those on board attempted to recover the positioning system by turning it on and off. It took about 30 minutes for the Topaz's crew to regain control and restart the failed dynamic positioning system. When Yuasa reached Lemons on top of the underwater structure, his body was still. He looked through his mask. Water got into the helmet. He attached his air hose to Lemon's mask, dragged him back to the bell, and handed him over to Alcock. Lemons was blue and not breathing when they removed his helmet. It had been 37 minutes since his umbilical cord had snapped, and he had been without oxygen for more than 30 minutes. Alcock instinctively gave him 2 mouth-to-mouth resuscitation breaths. And then, out of nowhere, Lemons inhaled. His eyes were open. He gave a blink. It was a big moment for Frederick, who was watching via monitor. "Are you okay?" he inquired over the intercom. Lemons gave a hesitant thumbs up. They poured hot water over him as quickly as they could to warm him up as much as possible. They were soon on the Topaz's deck. Later examinations showed that Lemons had passed without brain damage. It was not clear to anyone how the body managed to cope with the lack of oxygen. Hypothermia could have put him in shutdown mode too, sending oxygen to his organs. And only 3 weeks later, the same team returned to the same place to finish the work they had started. We would like to thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed